Welcome to Great Shot. This is the Great Shot Podcast, a Crack Racquets and Tennis Channel Podcast Network production. My name is Alex Gruskin. On today's show, we have what we call the deciding point, our weekly recaps of all the action happening across the college tennis world. Of course, this past weekend was of particular importance and excitement to college tennis fans everywhere, as we had the 2022 ITA Kickoff Weekend on our hands. Of course, our Crack Racquets team was so fortunate to be able to cover 7 different regions throughout the course of the past 4 days. We thank all of you listeners who tuned in to our coverage. A shout out, as always, to super producer Daniel Westoff. He killed it on the ones and twos and broadcasts like that, something we are looking forward to doing more moving forward. But of course, on today's show, we have to recap all of last weekend's action, talk about our 5 most impressive performers, talk to Old Dominion women's tennis head coach Dom Manilla on what was a standout performance from his team to advance to the National Indoor Championships. Then, of course, we want to preview the week ahead, talk about the matches all of you fans can expect over the course of the next few days. Then, of course, offer our first Cracked Racquets top 10 poll of the 2022 season. But before we can do any of that, I got to bring in my co-host, the only man you would want to help you steer the ship on a weekend like that. Of course, you know him as your co-favorite writer on our website, crackrackets.com, founder of the No Ad, No Problem blog, known curmudgeon on college tennis Twitter. Of course, it is our friend John J. Parsons. Jay, hey, great shot. Welcome back to the show. You worn down or still adrenaline rushing after a weekend like that?
Well, first of all, known curmudgeon. My reputation precedes me. That's a new addition. We'll have to talk about that one off mic. But no, my Red Zone debut, that was exciting. I was worn out after that, though. I have no idea how you do it. I think you probably spoke 95% of the time, and I was just 5% of the time, but it's a lot of work. So I was worn out. I hadn't checked my phone in hours. You know, people thought I was dead. It was a whole thing, but it was great to join you on the broadcast. Looking forward to do more of those. It makes these shows that much more exciting. Feels like I've immersed myself through the weekend, so I'm ready to go.
3 things off of that. A, curmudgeon has a positive connotation. Troublemaker is a bad thing. Curmudgeon means you're, poking the bear, but in the best way possible, in a way to try and make all of us better. Or at least that's how I was raised.
We'll workshop that one.
All right. You're right. We'll put that in the workshop. Part B, 95%, 5%. I feel your passive aggressive dig. That's just a dagger. I know what you're doing there. But yeah, welcome to the I have 300 unresponded texts life. That's the fun of being a part of this Crack Racquets team. But I want to emphasize this again. It's super producer Daniel Westoff who kills it each and every week. He's got to change courts constantly. He always has to be locked in. I can wander and look at a score here or an update there. Westoff always on the ones and twos too. So shout out to him. Of course, we have him on the ones and twos today. And hopefully all of you now are tuning in live on YouTube. I know some of you will be listening to this in podcast form. I always appreciate those who do that. But come join us each and every week here. Jay and I are going to be recording these 9 p.m. Eastern time. I don't think I do anything at 9 a.m. anymore. 9 p.m. Eastern time here, talking about all of the latest and greatest happenings in the college tennis world. We hope all of you tuning in right now will interact with us throughout the show. We want to hear your takes. We want to know what all of you are thinking, your reactions. But of course, to those of you listening on the podcast, we hope you join us moving forward. I also have to give a shout out to our new sponsor of the Deciding Point, Jay. It is a company I know near and dear to my heart. It's our friends at Swing Tennis, and I am so grateful to be able to offer a personal testimonial to the technology being developed by Swing Tennis. Some of you know I played club tennis back in college, formative years. Hubris from that gave me the confidence to do what I do today. That's something to unpack a different time. But of course, something that I still near and dear to my heart is getting to meet up with my former college tennis, club tennis teammates. And getting the opportunity to go, we went down to Miami a couple of months ago and we had a big hitting weekend. And of course, all of us still want to document our stuff, right? We want to see ourselves play. We want to know who the best is. We want to analyze our game, how bad it looks now compared to what it once may have looked like. One of our buddies, Kyle Zoo, brings out his phone. He says, guys, I downloaded this app. It's called the Swing Tennis app. We say, oh, okay, what's that? He's like, well, it documents your play, but and then he started explaining it. And as always, none of us listened because it was Kyle. And we're like, okay, put it up. And of course, they put up the SwingVision app right away on the SwingVision app on his phone. And he says, trust me, I'm going to record the session. You guys are going to enjoy this. So he records it. We take it down. We open up the SwingVision app right away. Forehands, backhands, approach shots, volleys, serves. What do you want to see by category? And we're like, wait, what is this? And we are so fortunate to say now that those friends at SwingVision are now our partners here at Cracked Racquets. They've documented over 100,000 players, over 1 million different swings. They can document your game moving forward as well. And we're going to give all of you listeners the chance to learn more about our friends at SwingVision. Later on in this show, you're going to hear from their founder. You're going to hear an interview he did with our friends at Tennis Channel a few days ago. And again, this is a partnership we're so excited to explore. It's a company Andy Roddick, James Blake, others are invested into because it really is the future to document yourself, to be able to see your ball trajectory, see how you need to improve, and to have it all organized for you. We see the future with SwingVision. We think all of you will as well. So shout out to our friends at SwingVision, latest and greatest sponsors here of us at Cracked Racquets. Really excited to be partnering with them moving forward. But Jay, with all of that said, SwingVision aside, let's talk about last week's ITA Kickoff Weekend. And I want to start with a recap of our predictions, talk to all of you about the 15 teams that advanced to the National Indoor Finals in Wisconsin. If we can, super producer Daniel Westoff, let's put that graphic on the screen now. I apologize to those of you podcast listeners hearing that. But of course, this is what you're missing out on. We have the list. How did Jay do? How did I do over the course of the week? Jay, you go 12 for 15, my friend, 12-3. That's pretty darn good, right? 80% hit percentage, and not a shock, you beat me. I only get 10 of 15 correct. Now, I'll say that, you know what? I'm not going to defend myself. You win, my friend. Mazel tov. You listeners can see the teams on the screen. For those of you listening in podcast form, the 15 teams to advance: Texas, Pepperdine, UNC, Georgia, Cal, NC State, UVA, Florida, Oklahoma, Ohio State, Texas A&M, USC, Auburn, Washington, Old Dominion, and then, of course, our 16th team will be the host, the University of Wisconsin. Notably absent, Jay, you sent out this tweet. We talked about it in the moment. No Stanford, no UCLA, no Duke. That's got to be the first time this century none of those teams are there. Gloat, if you will, my friend. But overall, your takeaways from the weekend.
Well, there was really one goal for the weekend.
Beat
and
me?
That was to beat you.
Yeah.
So I'm very proud to have accomplished that goal. And not by one, but two. So I would say not particularly close, given in the grand scheme of things. Overall,
I will say this. I'm going to say by one, because I didn't call Washington over UCLA because I just didn't want to look. I mean, it was dumb. I was tentative. But like 10.5 to 12, 10.5, 1.5. You covered the spread.
Check the tapes. We discussed it equally. Washington had a chance. I moved him out of my tier 1 locks for that same reason. But neither one of us were to pull the trigger on that one. The three that were the most surprising we'll talk about for me were Auburn, Old Dominion, and Washington.
I mean, yeah. Of course. No, I mean, all of them. I mean, there were upsets is the key here. And you can see on the graphic who were the hosts that lost. UCLA ends up getting knocked off. Florida State ends up getting knocked off. Georgia Tech, UCF, obviously, notably Duke gets knocked off as well. Host seeds, it was no sure thing, right? And I mean, there was 4-3 tennis across the board. But yeah, there was some serious damage done.
Yeah, much more felt like on the women's side than the men's side. I think a lot of this is due to, the change in the rosters that we're starting to see with the new additions, more so than ever, I feel like, with the extra year of eligibility. And it feels like we're operating on like a half to half basis, like fall season, spring season. It's like H1 and H2 of the year rather than a full academic year. But overall, it made the weekend super exciting. Ton of 4-3s, lots of upsets, which is what you want for the kickoff weekend, right? Not as fun when it just goes chalk.
No, there was no chaser. Straight shots. We're into the college tennis season, and you talk now about some of your most impressive performers. That's our next exercise here, and that's what we want to do. Of course, we'll try to briefly touch on all of the regional winners, the teams that advanced to our final 16 in Madison, but we wanted to narrow it down to our 5 most impressive performers of the weekend. We have the countdown for all of you now. Let's start out with the number 5 team on our list. And I don't think this is going to be a team that will surprise any of our listeners, our viewers here today to see on this top 5. It's got to be the University of Virginia, who, yes, were a preseason top 10 team, both from the ITA rankings and our college tennis, our college contender series as well. And yes, they were hosts this weekend, and they earned an easy 4-0 victory over James Madison. But you look for this Virginia team to knock off a Stanford team that preseason, and I will say I thought they were going to have Michaela Gordon, but preseason, we're very much in the conversation as a potential team to make a national championship run when you bring in players like Connie Ma, like Alex Yepafanova, all of the talent they brought back as well. Certainly, this was a battle, and the result said as much. 4-3, who's ultimately advanced, that they dropped the doubles point, get wins from their top 4. It was an impressive performance for Coach O'Leary and Virginia.
Yeah, it was absolutely. You mentioned the sweep at the top 4 after losing doubles. I think that was what was most impressive for me. I think we know that Virginia is really strong up top. I was concerned that once they lost that doubles point, the bottom of the lineup would be what was going to lose them this match. And ultimately, that top 3 of Navarro, Travinsky with a great win over Yepafanova, and to have Subash at 3, that's a luxury, right? That's definitely one of, if not the most dangerous top 3 in the country. And for them to get a win at 4, that's a huge boost. That's what they need. And they played, at least at the number 6 match, they played Stanford really close. So, this was a team we thought was going to be dangerous. They did this without freshman Melody Collard, who I thought was kind of going to be that linchpin piece at number 4 and allow some of the returners to play 5 and 6. I'm not sure when we'll see her back, but overall, an incredibly impressive victory for Virginia to just rely on the strength of that top 3 and top 4 now.
Yeah, and you talked about Travinsky, the freshman who lines up at that number 2 singles position. I believe she was 9-7 in the fall, which is pretty good for a freshman to get 9 victories. But I mean, for her to start out at the number 2 singles position and get the win over Yepafanova in 3 sets, when all due respect, Yepafanova, probably the more highly touted recruit coming into this season. At least you look at the ITA newcomers rankings, right? I think Yepafanova was ahead of Travinsky on that list. It's a hell of a win for Travinsky, and it justifies the decision from Coach O'Leary to play Subash at 3. And when you talk about locks from a lineup perspective, Subash at 3 is a lock of locks, right? You feel pretty good about her in that position against just about anyone, including teams like Pepperdine and Texas and UNC and Cal. Now I feel like has to be thrown on that list as well. And just for that win, and then for Emma Navarro, who, we have taken her excellence for granted, but a 3-set victory for her after dropping a tight second set to Connie Ma. She didn't go away, and that's what you expect out of a defending NCAA champ. That also could very well be, Jay, an NCAA singles final preview. If this was, how they do preseason Super Bowl odds and they give you all the different combinations, this would be a top 5 combination, I think, right now. It's not absurd to see Ma and Navarro face off later in May.
Certainly. And I expect Connie Ma to continue to get better, right? I mean, this is someone who is new to college tennis. She has a lot to learn, both off the court in terms of just adjusting to the atmosphere. She fits like a hand in a glove. I was talking to a few people in this week, and you can just see she thrives on this energy. You can see once she kind of understands what it means to play in college tennis, she's just going to be such a force for so many years to come. But ultimately, Navarro's experience just paid off. And, you look at her and she was cool out there throughout the entire match, and just so clutch in the end. And I thought they both played really well. So I would not surprise me at all to see this as a later round in May.
Yeah. And on the flip side, let's talk about it for Stanford. young team, no Gordon. Interesting to see the lineup, the freshmen in the top two positions. And, then it goes Blake, Geller at 3 and 4, Valencia Shu, another freshman at that number 5 spot, Sarah Choi at 6. Choi, Shu do end up getting the victories. I think if you're the Cardinals, you feel pretty good about coming out of this weekend, right? Because this is an experienced Virginia team. And yeah, Yepifanova loses at 2, but, the Subash loss or the Subash victory and the Navarro over Ma victory, you feel like this is a pretty good building block for your young team, right? If you're Coach Faroud.
Yeah, I mean, this is could be one of those losses you look back early in the season and say that helped us, give us some fire that we needed to continue on for the rest of the season. I do think it's a big hit to not be attending national indoors this year, particularly with the expanded field. So you can kind of pencil this in for another year of Stanford being underranked, despite the talent that they have on their team. Thankfully for them, it seems like the Pac-12 will be, on the upswing, at least with Cal and USC, and they'll play matches against Pepperdine. But that's probably what blows the most, not necessarily losing this 4-3 loss to Virginia at home, but just the lack of opportunity to get additional matches at indoors.
Yeah, and you mentioned the matches they have coming in. I think they're playing Pepperdine this year as well. And so, look, Stanford's going to get the chance to earn ranked victories, but for a young team, that national indoors so valuable. So, of course, we'll look back to Stanford, and of course, shout out to Arkansas, who gets that third win 4-1 over James Madison. But that was your Virginia region, and certainly with the experience of the Cavaliers up top, and just how good Navarro's looked, and Subash at 3, you feel like, okay, there's 2 points on the board. We got to find 2 more. They've got the talent to find those 2 more. Big weekend for Virginia. That's a good win for them. That's a next step sort of win, right? Last year they were young. This year you beat the young team. Good win for the Cavaliers. But that's number 5 on our list. Let's talk about number 4, a team we talked about last week after they struggled on the road. And struggle might be a bit hyperbolic. 4-3 losses at Duke, at NC State. I actually think in retrospect, we shouldn't knock our number 4 team, the Ohio State Buckeyes, for that loss, because you look, Duke right in the mix for a national indoor spot. NC State comfortably cruising into the national indoors. Ohio State on the road, first weekend of the season. They now come back home for the kickoff weekend. Tough regional. We all circled it. Oklahoma State, LSU, Tennessee coming to town. Buckeyes drop 1 point on their way to the national indoor finals, earn a 4-1 victory over Oklahoma State, a match we were fortunate enough to be on the broadcast for. And I thought a match that was sneaky high quality, despite some absences for the Cowgirls. You look for Ohio State, they're able to take the doubles point, right? And that was something they did not do against against NC State nor Duke. And then, they get victories from the freshman Sydney Ratliff at 3. They get a victory from Coley Allen, the veteran, at 4. And then the player of the weekend for them is Isabelle Boulay, who has been the standout starter amongst all the starters for them this season. 2 more singles victories for her, 2 doubles victories as well. She and Coley Allen looked excellent in that 6-3 victory at number 2 over Mertena and Tomase. And then, Boulay gets a win at 2. Ratliff, the freshman, delivers at 3. In the end, the All-American up top, Arena Contos, comes through 4-0 over a Tennessee team that dominated LSU the day prior. And, with that result in mind, we thought this one was going to be a barn burner. We thought this one was going to be close. With all due respect to Tennessee, it was not. And you can see the embrace there on your screen if you're watching on YouTube between 2 Tennessee Volunteers and Coach Ojeda and Coach Schaub. But when looking at this match, it doesn't tell me anything about Tennessee, like in a negative aspect. What this match told me was the Buckeyes they looked at last weekend. They said, this is unacceptable. Coach Schaub and the team corrected the ship. They were excellent this weekend, and this performance is more a testament to them than anything else.
Yeah, and that's what makes them on this list for most impressive teams, right? Just the ability in which they bounce back from 2 tough road losses. We had them on upset alert, just given the strength of the region of the teams that they were hosting. And, they drop 1 point en route to it. And the manner in which they did it was convincing, right? Against high quality teams. And I think what was interesting too, is we talk a lot about Ohio State's depth being one of the things that won them a ton of matches last year. It was doubles in the top of the lineup this weekend, which was really great to see. You mentioned Isabelle Boulay, who had a really fantastic weekend. Freshman Sydney Ratliff, getting those wins at the top of the lineup tells you a lot about Ohio State. You feel like they're probably going to figure out the bottom of the lineup soon, but if that top of the lineup clicks the way it did this weekend, they're going to continue to be a super dangerous team.
Yeah, and in particular, to have Boulay and Allen, who were like 16-3 or something crazy like that last season at that number 2 position, and not completely unjustifiably. Yes, I think Coach Schaub and Tucker, collaborated and they were conspired. That's the word I was looking for, because this is nefarious, by the way. Collaborated, not nefarious. Conspired, nefarious. The same way, known curmudgeon, not nefarious. Known troublemaker, nefarious. I think they were just like, all right, we're going to put Cash and Voetzl at 2, and you're going to put Boulay and Allen at 2. And then they're just going to be like, well, what is up in Columbus? And no one will say anything. I think Allen and Boulay are as good of a doubles team as you're going to find. And it just feels like there are now options for this team to have a junior-senior combo in Marzal and Dorme at that 3 position. I thought they played well all weekend long. And then again, it's just experience everywhere, plus a freshman who was much better in weekend 2 than weekend 1. Where's the weakness? There's no glaring hole in this Buckeyes lineup. And I think that's the biggest takeaway for me.
Agreed. Right. If anything, you don't feel that bad about the depth. They'll figure it out. They were probably a little more vulnerable this weekend down low than they were up top, but that's been a strength for them. Certainly last year, I anticipate it will be once they figure out who's the 4, who's 5, who's 6. Ultimately, super impressed with the performance. And I mean, they should feel really good about going into indoors. This is a team, if you watched any of them this weekend, they play indoor tennis. They are aggressive, and they'll be looking to get a few scalps at Wisconsin courts that they're comfortable on.
No, it's a big point there. Indoor tennis, Midwest town, Buckeyes, a team to circle as one that could be sneaky dangerous at the national indoors. But again, that's the number 4 team on our list. Just to put a cap on the region, you look overall, Oklahoma State able to get a win over an LSU team that didn't field a number 3 doubles team, didn't field the number 6 singles team, but I thought Oklahoma State looked really good. I think they're in the mix for a top 16 seed, and ditto for Tennessee, who dominated LSU. I think they dropped 5 games in the 3 through 5 singles spots in that match. They were dominant.
Yeah, that Oklahoma State team is going to be really dangerous. They were without a few starters during this weekend, which is tough because if you followed indoors last year, you know that they struggled with health there, hosting indoors. So you hope that they're healthy soon. They've scheduled super aggressively. So if they can get healthy, they have the schedule to certainly cement themselves into that top 16. So definitely be on the lookout for them. And we talk a lot about the depth in the SEC. Tennessee is going to be up there in terms of that top half of the SEC. It's going to be a gauntlet there.
Well, that's the thing. You get Georgia, you get Florida, you get Texas A&M up there in the SEC. Tennessee's going to have shots at all of them. Now, Of course, they would have loved to make that national indoors. And I do think, again, that's a team you do not want them. If they're not a top 16 seed, you're being like, are you serious? We got Tennessee in our region come the NCAA tournament. Ditto with Oklahoma State, who, man, one of my sneaky takeaways, and we'll get into this, I think the Big 12 sneaky good this year, just across the board. It may not even be sneaky. They're just good. Like, who's your worst team in the conference? Like, we don't have to. Yeah, I was going to say we don't have to count anyone out, but it's just like, again, I guess team 6, 7, 8, they're all very good this season, and so I'm intrigued to see how Oklahoma State does, and I'm excited for Texas this year because last year it just felt like they steamrolled everyone. This year's team will not steamroll through the Big 12. And so anyways, that was one of my sneaky takeaways, but certainly you're right. The Buckeyes, they look dangerous. They look much improved. And this is just a callous team now. You look at all the matches they played, Oklahoma State, Tennessee, NC State, Duke, they're ready for the national indoors. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. But with that in mind, let's get to number 3. And, for our top 3 teams, all pulled off upsets here, went on the road, beat off the host and, knocked them off, and now headed to the national indoors in Wisconsin. A team that, in retrospect, I'm just so angry at myself for not picking them just to prevent you the bragging rights. Even if I was wrong, I'd be like, well, at least now we're both wrong. But our number 3 team has to be Oklahoma, who not only drops the doubles point before taking a 4-1 victory over Furman and doing exactly what a team the top 10 team does to a really good 25 through 30 team like Furman and beating them at the 5 and 6 singles position, which is what Oklahoma does in, to get 4 of their singles victories. But it's also just the way that Duke match played out. And, we were fortunate to be on the call for that match. And we watched the doubles point. Duke was in control for the first 30 minutes. They just were. And, they get a quick win in that match. I believe it was, I want to say for Duke, what was it? The number 2 position that they got the quick win at in
Georgia
doubles?
In doubles, it was at number 3.
Number 3. Thank you. It was the number 3 position. Yeah, it was Jackson and Coleman, the 6-1 victory for Oklahoma. Thank you. And then, at number 1, Drummy, Barankova, they're on serve and they're up ahead. And it just felt like they were the ones with the break point chances. And then in a 5-minute switch, Corley got the break. And, now Duke's on their back foot at 1. And, Sleeth and Pisareva are up a break seemingly the entire match before giving that break back and ceding it to Duke. But they were up on the scoreboard seemingly, the entire time. And then they're up 1-0. Just like that. And they race out to first sets in singles, whether it's Sleeth or Corley or, Staker. And then, Chanta delivers. Oklahoma State's just really good. Brag. Take your moment. This is your time to shine, Jay. You were right.
This has been a team that I've been talking about for a few months now, just with the talent they have, the depth that they have. It's been really impressive. I think the biggest question was just how does the team pull all those pieces together, right? They've got these new additions, they've got transfers, and, they come into Durham, they're facing a Duke team that is coming off a very impressive weekend. They had just beaten Princeton, they had beaten Ohio State, and the manner in which they did it to me said, this is a team, right? Because that was a team victory. That was everyone contributing at every spot in the lineup, whether it was staying out there extra long or, getting your point on the board. Just a really impressive team victory for the Oklahoma Sooners. And, it was one I had circled. I'm glad I called the upset. I couldn't find it official confirmation, but I went back and looked at their schedule. I'm pretty sure this is at least the first time in forever that they've qualified for national indoors.
Yeah, I would agree. We'll say first time in forever. Coach Cohen, you have the digits. You can let me know how incorrect we are. But you're absolutely right. And again, Furman match aside and watching that Furman team, I think they are just as good as last season. Like, keep your eye on Furman. They are dangerous. Old Dominion is dangerous. They may take a scalp at the NCAA tournament. One of those teams I could very well see at least in the Sweet 16. But you look for this Oklahoma team, and you're right. It was the fact that they blocked out what happened at number 1 singles, Georgia Drummy, an 0-0 victory in about 35 minutes. And it was 1-0 on the scoreboard. Certainly didn't feel that way. I mean, just for Oklahoma and for their freshmen in particular, for Chanta to win over Kelly Chen at number 4. Like, come on now. That's the sort of depth you pray for if you're Coach Cohen, and you just say, okay, let's just stay alive out there and let's not lose there. Let's give our seniors or our contributors a little bit more time. And then, again, Stecker's week at number 6, just for her to get back-to-back victories. They've got the depth. Obviously, Corley, Sleeth, Corley, you feel pretty good about your top 3 going up against anyone. And, credit to Chloe Beck, who I'm telling you, she just doesn't lose in those scenarios. I think she was going to beat Sleeth after dropping that first set. And, credit to Ellie Coleman, the freshman, who did fight back and ultimately takes that second set and does keep her team alive. But it just felt like Duke was on their back foot from those last 10 minutes of doubles through the first hour and a half of singles. And just at a certain point, the wall breaks and Oklahoma broke them. And that's why they're number 3 on this list, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And
because Duke played well is what I'm trying to clarify. Like, Duke played well enough to win.
Exactly. And this is a very good Duke team who showed us that the weekend before. And Oklahoma is just as good, clearly better on the day. So in some ways you feel like the Chanta win is a benefit of, coming in January and like not knowing who Kelly Chen is or what her record in college is, and just like facing the person across the net. But overall, to get wins both from Chanta and Staker, to your point, freshmen delivering, that's what you love to see. And they obviously have the experience of the Corley sisters and others throughout the lineup. So they're building something special in Norman, and it's going to be exciting to see them at national indoors.
Yeah, we have confirmation, by the way. You may have seen me smiling. First time ever, highest ranked win in program history. So shout out to the Sooners. Yeah, they were excellent. They really were. And, you look at the schedule now moving forward for this team that they are going to have the looks at, of course, Texas later on this season, all of those Big 12 teams we talked about. Then, post indoors, they get USC at home. They're going to UCF, who probably won't be as high as the ranking as they are now, but that's still a good match. Then, of course, we've talked about this before, the hidden gem in late April. It was just like, you know what? You want to play Pepperdine? And then Pepperdine's like, yeah, what's worse than a trip to, nothing better than a trip to Norman on April 17th. And so, yeah, it's good scheduling, certainly. And it'll give us a chance to see just how good these Sooners are, because it does feel like a relatively new team. But to your point, and you've said it the whole time, Jay, a team that's ready to have success right now.
Yeah, I mean, they've come out of the gate firing. And this is what you want to see. Question to see how long they can continue the momentum for sure. But overall, I think this team is going to have a lot of success this season. And I just think a lot of success in the years to come. There's no reason why Oklahoma tennis can't be, well, I was going to say a threat in the Big 12 each year, but maybe in the SEC moving forward. So but overall, just a great weekend for the Sooners.
That's how high you are on this program. You think even in the future, there's still going to be a threat in the Big 12. That's what that tells me. No. All right. Well, they're the number 3 on our list. Now, on the flip side, you look for Duke, who the weekend prior, really good weekend, beat Ohio State, beat Princeton at home. They played well enough to win this match. And like you'll see in our top 10 rankings, I feel no worse about this Duke team. I think this is another one of those instances we learned about Oklahoma. This is not a detraction from Duke.
Yeah, not at all. This is one of those bad draws, right? This is one where you're like, can't they both advance, right? I think these teams are both top 16 in the country. But overall, not a great draw for Duke. They had to take on just a really good Oklahoma team. And I don't feel any worse about them. Still feel really strong about them moving forward. They've got the experience up top. They've got freshmen who will continue to adjust to college tennis, really solid players. We saw that in doubles. So, no issues about Duke. They'll still be a threat in the ACC.
No, I didn't get to see much of Jackson, but Coleman 18-0, games won on day number 1, and then good fight for her at on day 2 as well. So I like the pieces they have, and then honestly, again, I really like Furman. And I think Nebraska was pretty darn good too. Like, I think Nebraska is very much NCAA tournament should be the expectation for that team. If not this season, because they've got a lot of sophomores, certainly over the next couple of years. But that's our number 3 performers, Oklahoma. And of course, it's always worth mentioning, there's still a player out of their lineup they'll bring back in Guzman. So you've brought that up in the past. Yeah. It's going to be exciting times, certainly moving forward. Well, with that in mind, let's get to our number 2 team here. And, again, it's tough choices, right? I'm sure some of you are thinking, wait, there's only 2 teams left. I feel like there are 3 teams who should be in these 2 spots. Don't worry. We're going to try and touch on everyone. But the number 2 team on our list, I think, has to be anytime you do something for the first time in, almost 20 years or 20 years, however long it was, you get into our top 5. And that's the University of Washington, who, of course, the headline result, 4-3 over UCLA to advance to the national indoors. But perhaps the sneakier result, 4-3 over Denver the day before, to do that back-to-back, to have the exact same match calculus. Let's win doubles. Let's win 2. Let's win 3. Let's win 4. I mean, we learned about this Washington team, and we'll get to the UCLA side in a second, but we're a glass half full show here at Cracked Racquets. What a testament and a credit to the Huskies that they were able to do this.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to put some stats to some of those first times that you were talking about, this is their first ever win against UCLA in LA. It's their first win since 2003. And the only other one was in 2001. So this is program history for Washington. If you listen to Coach Stevenson's interview with you on the Cracked Interviews podcast, she talks about wanting to beat UCLA and what that would mean for the program. And they did it. They did it in spectacular fashion. I think in doubles, they clinched, I believe, it in a tiebreak. And then they sweep the 2, 3, and 4. And you look at that, and that's probably not the recipe for success you would think they would have against UCLA. You think UCLA is so strong up top. Maybe you can eke out some wins against freshmen at the bottom, but that's not the way they did it, right? They were strong in the middle of the lineup, which was just super impressive, and took advantage of a really great opportunity for this team. And you always love to see programs like Washington, who had flirted with kind of the top 16, top 10 a few years back, kind of come back this year and make a name for themselves.
I think if you would have asked Coach Stevenson, hey, Vanessa Wong's going to go 0-2 this weekend, how do you think you're going to do? She'd be like, 1-1. Like, I don't know, we'll be okay. And they still won both matches. And to your point, you look at that UCLA match for them to get, 2 matches go to 3 sets, right? And they had dropped the second sets to both Bolton and Bagramov at those 2 and 3 singles positions. And yet they're able to take both back to back and just, again, you felt like once the domino fell at 2, that 3 was going to go their way. And just, again, this was a team that's very injured last year. And, we talked about that with Coach Stevenson. I always appreciate when I don't have to do the plugging. So thank you for the free plug, my friend. But
I'm a quick learn.
Yeah, thank you. Exactly. You know what? Not a curmudgeon anymore. But anyways, yeah, it's just, I feel like this was a team in particular that the pandemic slowed all of their momentum, because you're right. You go back to 2019, them in Kansas, like those were 2 of the stories of the 2019 season, those 2 teams and their push through to the top 16 and just what they were able to accomplish. And then the pandemic hits and things get weird. And now we're back to normal, and it's the normal sort of weird. And yeah, again, it's a testament to this Washington team. On the flip side, a loss to LMU to start the year. Now you lose to Washington at home as well. It's a rough start for the Bruins. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it, Jay.
Yeah, well, no one beats LMU 27 times in a row. So a rough start in Westwood for sure. And kind of inexplicably too, right? I mean, yeah, they have a lot of freshmen, but those are highly touted freshmen. You still have Forbes, you still have Bolton at the top of the lineup. That is a team on paper that should not be losing to LMU, regardless of what the talent looks like at 4, 5, 6, 7. Not good losses. And I thought in particular against Washington, they went up 3-1, even though they dropped doubles. They put up 3 victories on the board against Washington, put the scoreboard pressure on. Credit to Washington, who hung tough, won some second sets, hung around. It's concerning for UCLA, and it'll be curious to see how they rebound. They've got a good match coming up this weekend, but there's not really much more to say other than it's been a really bad start.
Here's the thing. Pepperdine twice, USC twice, Cal twice. You have the chance to make up some ground. Those are not easy matches, though. And you're at Stanford this year. And it's just like, again, you got Washington at home again. So you're going to get another shot at them. And certainly in a situation like this, it's very helpful if a team beats you, but you beat them. Everyone wins in that sort of scenario with the way the rankings work. But I don't know. Are you hitting the panic button yet? It's just like, it's the way they've lost these matches that are so concerning, right? These close third sets. And I suppose there's a silver lining there. It's like, well, 2 deciding points go our way. Shout out to the title. Maybe we win the match. And I do think you can make that case if you're a UCLA fan. And that's why I'm not hitting the panic button, because a 3-set loss is a 3-set loss. And that happens. Twice consecutively is certainly concerning, though.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about panic button with just such a storied program with such great coaches at the helm. They still have a ton of talent on this roster, right? It's not like the roster has been depleted. So I don't know about panic, but it's inexplicable, right? Like there's the start to the season, and these are matches, regardless of situations or circumstances, you don't lose one of them, let alone 2. So that's why it's concerning, because you can't kind of figure out exactly why they lost these matches.
Yeah, and in those, again, 2 Cal, 2 USC, 2 Pepperdine, 1 Stanford, so 7 matches. Anything short of 5-2 now, man, I don't know how you're going to be a top 5 seed. I don't know how you're going to be a top 8 seed. Like now you're playing catch up if you're the Bruins, and that's just pressure to have to chase. But of course, if this team is clicking on all cylinders, certainly we'll be able to talk about them moving forward. But yeah, I mean, credit to Washington. That's a hell of a performance. And we're going to get to see them now at the National Indoors. It's not in Seattle, folks. It's in Madison. They qualify on their own volition. Heck of a performance for Coach Stevenson and the Huskies. With all of that said, before we get to our number 1 most impressive team here on the weekend. And Scotty B, I know you've been chiming in the chat. I appreciate that. I'm telling you this, we're never going to talk Jim Harbaugh unless he stays at Michigan on this podcast ever again. If he stays, we'll talk about him however much you'd like. But let's ignore that for now. But we are going to talk about some of the other regions that caught our eye, some of the teams, advancing or who just missed our list. I think it's safe to say our first cut is the USC Trojans, right? Who were in a 4-3 win over Miami, who were in a 4-3 victory over Baylor. And yet, despite those 4-3 wins, and I do think my USC was impressive in the way they fought and, the way they fought back in particular against Miami for freshmen to deliver for them as well in that second match. At the same time, I come out of those regions thinking I learned more about Baylor and I learned more about Miami and that those two teams are both very, very good and right on the level. I don't know. USC's top end talent certainly helped them win out here. I mean, USC is really good is a thing, but I don't know. Had they won 4-1 or 4-0, then I might have said, okay, they're amongst the elite of the elite. That they won 4-3 over Baylor and Miami, that tells me, those two teams better than I thought they were at the start of the season. But part B is okay, USC's good. They're going to host an NCAA tournament region, but are they top 10? Are they top 5? I'm not quite sure yet.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. My hot take is that I feel worse about USC after this weekend than I did coming into the weekend.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's not a horrible take. It's not.
Well, I'll explain it because we know how good that top 2.5 is, I'll say, right? I think we still need to see more from Snowhon at number 3. We know how good that top half is. The bottom half is a big question mark for me. And now credit to USC because that's where they delivered this weekend. They got a win from Danielle Wilson. They got a win from Piper. Huge wins for them. But that's not what I was expecting it to be. That wasn't the fashion I was expecting it to be in. And I know they don't have Naomi Chung back in the lineup. Maybe if she gets back in, she's a linchpin at 4. So those are question marks for me in terms of when they play these elite teams who have much more depth at 4, 5, and 6. How does this USC stack up? And so, yeah, it feels more like, okay, maybe we're in the 12 to 16 range versus the 8 to 12.
Yeah, I think that's a fair takeaway. Now I'll say this. Wilson delivering at 6 on day 1. That's exactly what you ask for from one of your upperclassmen leaders. And she fights off match points. That's incredibly impressive. We're not trying to minimize what she did. And for your freshman.
Can we just pause on that match point? That 36 stroke match point was incredible after saving 3 match points.
And what was so amazing, I'm blanking on her name, I apologize, the Miami player, how unwilling she was to hit anything but a forehand. She's like, look, I'm hitting forehands here. And Wilson's like, all right, I know that's coming. I'll be ready for it. I'm going to try and attack that backhand wing. She was able to do it. And then again, freshman versus freshman down the home stretch of USC Baylor. That's what you ask for. That's what it's all about. And so it was awesome to get the chance to see that matchup. And again, I think if you're Baylor, you're like, all right, we're very much still in the mix, right where we were last season. Ditto if you're Miami. You're like, all right, the new people have, all these new faces are fitting in, and we've got some talent on our hands. And let's just wait till we figure out who goes where, and it all figures out. That said, Cayetano delivers for the Trojans. Selma Ewing delivers for the Trojans. Snow Hahn down the home stretch delivers for the Trojans. Again, they're still missing some faces as well, but it looks like they've got the pieces. That's why I'm not quite, I feel worse about them. I would hold. Stock's holding for USC, I would say, after this weekend. If you want to sell a bit, that's fair. You beat me this weekend, so I think you listeners know who you should probably be listening to. With all of that said, again, there are a lot of other teams who advance. What we're going to do to keep ourselves in check. Westoff, I'm going to ask you to put 5 minutes on the clock here. We're going to rapid fire through the rest of these regions. Westoff, get that clock on the board. Let's rock and roll. All right, Jay, we're going to start at the top here. Texas advances. They look comfortable doing so. Any takeaways for you?
The fact that Rapalou is behind Zanilova and Uvritsky on the depth chart, that is huge. If those two freshmen click the way the past freshmen did last year, this is another dangerous Texas team.
That's what I'm saying. What does that say about Rapalou or the freshmen? That's the concerning part.
Well, Rapalou had a good fall, so I would say it's a testament to the freshmen.
Exactly. Couldn't agree more. Scary stuff. All right. UNC region, they advance. That scoreline against Tulsa in the final was scary, Jay. What, they lost a game?
It was a joke. It's just O's and ones. Yeah. Right? It's just zeros and ones. Yeah. Exactly. Morse code.
Yeah, they're like, Westoff, will you be interested in this scoreline? Here, ones and zeros for you. And so, yeah, they And I'm not saying I'm wrong. I'm not seeding it yet because I still think I might be right long-term, but the lineup for them, Mora 1, Scotty 2, what was it? It was Tran 3, Crawley 4. Crawley 4 is a joke. I'm sorry. That's like Coach Calbus is winning if he gets Crawley at 4, but like that's the sort of talent they have that they can justify it. All right. We're going to move over some of this as we, again, continue to rock and roll here. Pepperdine, they advanced pretty comfortably. I thought it was a pretty good bounce back for them.
It was. Still no Patrick Lave in the lineup, something to monitor moving forward.
Yeah. And so we'll see as she gets healthy. She's back on team. Notre Dame, Colorado, Columbia, anything from them? That was interesting to see how those other matches played out there. Yeah, no, nothing particular. Yeah, no, that's fair. Look, there's a lot of tennis. It's hard to follow it all. Certainly, I would agree with that. All right, let's move on to our next region now, Georgia. I was on the tennis Twitter sphere. I was reading a lot of fond takes about the Bulldogs. Did not get to see them. Did you get to see any?
Got to see a little bit of it. It was tough with the indoor setup and the 4 courts and, being with you for 5 hours on Saturday. But, this is a team that made the quarterfinals last year with Kowalski at 3. She's at 6 right now. That is a lock.
That's
right?
What I say. Yeah, no, I agree with you. That's what I say about super producer Dana Westhoff. I'm going for the Cleveland Challenger for 4 days. He's like, thank God. Although I think by day 4, we might miss each other. So, we'll worry about that later. All right. Raleigh, NC State. Iowa State drops out of this region, unfortunately, not able to make the trip. Shout out to Penn State for filling in a pinch. Shout out to the Nittany Lions. Got to give them credit there. You look for it. NC State, ultimately, pretty comfortable against Penn State. Pretty comfortable, I thought, against Wake Forest. No new takeaway for me.
Nope. Yeah, we learned more the previous weekend, NC State.
I agree with you. Now, Florida, same deal. I think we knew they were going to be good. Florida State might be the takeaway from that region. Like, what is going on right now in Tallahassee? But, Coach Thorquist has a team on his hands. Florida's, I think I'm where you are. I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of Oklahoma, Florida comps.
That's interesting. With the connective tissue being Sleeth, who transferred from Florida to Oklahoma. Yeah, I mean, look, they're a deep team. They've got strength at the top of the lineup. There was no question they were going to get through the unmanned Florida State. That's the big question, is where is their roster?
Yeah, and so that's something for us to continue to look at as well. You look elsewhere, Auburn win over UCF. I mean, Auburn dominated. It was, I don't know, Auburn the real, what did we learn about this? I was not expecting this sort of performance. They looked very good.
Yeah, I wasn't either, particularly with UCF having Zaleva back in the lineup. She was at 2 for them. Auburn has a really strong top 3, and they flex their muscles there. I think UCF has struggled to start the season, and I think Auburn capitalized. But that's another SEC team, right? You talk about Tennessee, Auburn. I mean, just the strength is top to bottom going to be much better this year than it was last year.
Yeah, no, and so we'll keep an eye on the Tigers. Always sneaky quality program there in the SEC, and we talked about that SEC depth earlier. There's a lot of fun. Again, there's it's going to be a fun SEC season. All right, I'm looking at the clock. I'm like, we might finish on time. Cal cruised. I have nothing to say. Vanderbilt, that they didn't put, had Vanderbilt made that 4-1, 4-2, maybe we circle them and move them up a tier in the SEC. I think they're probably 4, 5, 6 in the conference this season, and Cal's very, very good.
Yeah, 4 feels very generous. Cal is just that good this year.
Yeah, agree with you there. San Diego, by the way, pretty sneaky solid there on the women's side. Last one, College Station. Texas A&M looked validated our top 10 spot, I'll say. Now, South Carolina had some absences. Princeton, tough weekend. Floor is yours. Last 7 seconds. Take us home.
Princeton, panic button, 0-6. Going to be tough to recover. Freeman still looked good, though.
Yeah, that's the sneaky takeaway. I'm going to give you bonus time there. I just won't say anything else. Any other thoughts on Texas A&M? Because that was a pretty good region.
That was our most interesting region, right? And they looked dominant. They did that without Townsend in singles either. So they're a deep team. Branstein recovered from her loss to Freeman. She looked really good against Texas Tech. The biggest surprise for me was the fact that South Carolina beat Princeton without 3 of their top 4. In terms of most surprising results in that region, that was where it came.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. Well, then with all of that said, let's talk about our number 1 team, our number 1 region. That's got to be the action that happened in Atlanta. And our number 1 team is Old Dominion, who earns a 4-3 victory over the host Georgia Tech on night number one. They drop the doubles point there. And, again, for this Old Dominion team to, in that match, get victories at the number 1 spot, number 2 spot, number 5, number 6. It was the balance of their performance there. And then, for them the next day against Ole Miss, they take the doubles point and still they get a win at number 1. They get a win at number 2. And of course, those names start up Seva, Sasnskaya, 2 of the most successful players in the fall in doubles. They're the number 3 team in the country right now. And, they're showing some depth as well. What a performance. I mean, for this ODU team to make the national indoor spot for the first time, coming off of their first Conference USA title last season, and a team that's perennially 13-6, 14-5. Last year, Jay, I looked this up because we talked with their coach, and there's a long form episode with him that all of you listeners will be able to hear on our Cracked Interviews podcast. But, you look for this team last season, I'm pretty sure their losses were like North Carolina. I'm 4 of 5 of them were to teams that make the Sweet 16. The 5th one was their first match of the season to Penn State. So like last year, this team was right. They beat everyone they were supposed to beat, and they lost their first match of the season. This year, they're beating some teams. And just like, this has always been a program in the mix. This just feels like that culmination, that breakthrough moment. That's why they're number 1.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you talk about program first qualifying for this list, right? This is the first time they're ever going to national indoors. One of the few non-Power 5 teams who has made it in history. So what an incredible performance. This region we had tabbed being a big question mark, right? We really didn't know much about Georgia Tech. We hadn't seen Georgia's lineup Michigan's lineup at full strength, and Ole Miss. But for ODU to come through here, just an incredible performance. You mentioned the doubles duo, number 3 in the country, but they came through at number 1 and number 2 singles. They both go 4-0 on the weekend. An incredible performance from both of them. And now they get to test their chops, right? At national indoors, they're going to see at least 3 top 16, top 25 teams. And that will go a long way for their ranking and for hopefully making a deeper run in the NCAAs.
Yeah, and look, big picture, I felt pretty good about our Wolverines. We're young. We looked good. Shout out to little sis. Julia Fligner gets a 3-set win on day 2. And I mean, if you're Georgia Tech, 0-2, 2 4-3 losses, you're just like, come on, like, how did this happen to us? And I still think though that they didn't look bad considering no Jones, no Flores. It's a new team. It's a new page for Coach Harmon and the Yellow Jackets. I actually think that's still a pretty talented squad that will be a lot better come May, and they're going to get some good wins in the ACC. But yeah, like Ole Miss solid, and all these teams were solid, and ODU just, they won the clutch moments. They won the clutch points. And there feels like there's some confidence and there's a recipe there. You feel like now they've got the name brand recognition with a number 3 doubles team in the country and, multiple top 1, ranked singles players as well. And just veteran depth everywhere. This team, I think now that they get this win as well, if they can scratch out a win at the national indoors and beat, say, oh man, if they could get a win over USC with what USC is going to do in the Pac-12, how great that would be for their rankings. But something like that, if they can just get a win over anyone not named Wisconsin, and I mean that lovingly, at the national indoors, now it's a show. Like now they've got top 16 seed sort of potential.
Yeah, and it also seems like they have scheduled more aggressively throughout the rest of the year. And so this national indoors is a huge bonus for them, right? They made that schedule maybe not thinking they'd make it to national indoors, right? They're the only number 4 seed to qualify. So that's going to be a huge bonus for them. And so if they can get 1 victory, none of those losses will hurt. They don't even need it, just because, the strength of what I assume Georgia Tech will bounce back. Mississippi will be boosted by the SEC, but just a program that now should believe that they belong. They were dominant at 1 and 2 singles, so they can hang with anybody, particularly given the double strength.
Yeah. And so, look, this is a team that I've had them in my top 20 in my USTA poll that I submitted. I will say that candidly. And it's so funny to hear you talk about the scheduling because that's something Coach Manilla talked about explicitly in the podcast we did today. Speaking of which, we have a clip from our coach of the week here at Cracked Racquets, Old Dominion women's tennis head coach Dom Manilla, obviously for his team to advance national indoor championships for the first time, 2 4-3 victories for them as well. It felt like not an easy pick actually, because there were some fantastic, all of these coaches could have been picked, everyone who advanced. And, again, we always want to shine a light on these programs like Old Dominion as well, who are these gems you find throughout the college tennis universe. And so I had the chance to speak with Coach Manilla earlier today. Now you're going to be able to hear that full conversation over on our Cracked Interviews podcast tomorrow. But for now, via our friends at SwingVision, here is a clip of my conversation with Old Dominion women's tennis head coach Dom Manilla. Joining us on the show now, the man who arguably had the best weekend of anyone across the country. Of course, you may know him as the reigning ITA Atlantic Region Coach of the Year, the reigning Conference USA Coach of the Year, head of the Old Dominion women's tennis team. Welcome to our show, head coach Dom Manilla. Coach, congratulations on a fantastic weekend. How are you feeling today?
Oh, I feel great today. Very excited for the challenge ahead at the National Indoor, but very, very pleased and feel very fortunate to be in this situation.
Yeah, no, and it is a pleasure for us to have you. Really appreciate you taking the time. I can only imagine how busy things are for you over on campus, but let's get right into it. 4-3 win over Georgia Tech, 4-3 win over Ole Miss. Your team going to the ITA National Indoor Finals for the first time in program history. Now, there have been a lot of, firsts in a while for you. Last year, first conference title championship since 2001 and first NCAA tournament victory ever. With that in mind, with everything your program, all of these programs have gone through over the past 18 months, what do achievements like this mean to you and the team?
I think those are the things that kind of keep us going. At a school like Old Dominion, to pull something like this off and to actually feel that you deserve it, not that you had it. It's sometimes these types of events can be, not the event itself, but sometimes these types of results can be a little fluky, and we don't feel like that at all. I feel like we feel very deserving to be there. So that's a great feeling. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think those types of successes, like this weekend, I wouldn't call it a micro success at all. That was a pretty successful weekend, but those types of things and, any small success we could find really drives, pushes us forward.
Yeah. And, again, for your team here this weekend, 4-3 win over Georgia Tech. Let's start there. Your team drops the doubles point. And obviously you have a doubles team in Startup Seva and Sasnskaya who had a ton of success over the course of the fall. And they're number 3 in the country as we enter the dual match season. They're up 5-1. But respectfully, Georgia Tech works you at the 2 and 3 doubles position. Pretty comfortable victories for them there. What'd you say to your team in between, and what response did you see from them to take those 4 singles victories?
It wasn't to downplay. I think sometimes you lose the doubles point and then you try and downplay. And I think that wasn't our message. Our message was, hey, good job to the 1, kind of taking care of business. But number 2, we needed to step up, and those players did. And then and number 3, I think that we just had a little bit of nerves. So we needed to kind of put some attention on those results that, hey, wasn't the way that we wanted to start it, but let's use that as a mental spark to bring that into the singles. I'm not sure how much that message worked, because we went out and lost 5 first sets, but something resonated with the team that afternoon to pull it off. That's for sure.
Yeah. And
but our number 2 and 3 doubles teams actually are the ones who got it done for us the next day against Ole Miss. Our number 2 team, they lost, I think it was 6-1 to Georgia Tech, and then they won 6-1 against 6-1 or 6-2 against Ole Miss.
Yeah, and that's what I wanted to bring up. So to see your team respond the way they do the next day, to take that doubles point over Ole Miss, and for it to not be the number 1 team to get the victories, as you point out. Again, I want to look big picture here, because you bring back 5 players from last year's roster, 4 of them back in the singles lineup here this season. And again, you look at last season's team, 5 losses, 4 of them to teams that make the round of 16 or further, the other your first match of the season. Yeah. Did you feel pretty good about this group coming in? Or again, was this, you talk about it being a micro success, is this a byproduct of the bigger picture?
It's a byproduct of the bigger picture. Absolutely. Actually, we only had 4 returning singles lineup players this year. We lost Brooke Pilkington was on our roster as a volunteer assistant at the beginning of the year. Now she's an assistant at William & Mary as a full-time spot. So but you're right. And if you look at our schedule, we made a pretty tough schedule, and then we selected to go to Georgia Tech as the 4 seed. So, unless I'm crazy, I had a lot of confidence in this group. Like this weekend, not this weekend. Tomorrow morning we leave. We head down to Gainesville. We play Florida Thursday night, and then we play Miami Saturday night. So it's a very challenging schedule. mostly all on the road, and then we return and go to national indoors. So we're always pushing the group.
Yeah, no, I reserve the right to figure out whether you're crazy or not. We'll find out, as the season progresses. But, certainly you talk about the faith you have in this group, and it starts with that top two in Startup Seba, Sasnouskaya, and obviously they have a fantastic fall on the doubles court. But more particularly, you look this weekend, they win at the top two singles flights in both matches that they play. And to get that effort from your top two, talk to me about what you've seen from this fall. Obviously, let's start with Yulia, the senior up top, to deliver that sort of result. What does that do for the rest of your team?
Well, Yulia has always been an inspirational figure in our program. If you recall, in the fall of 2000, just before the pandemic hit, we had a player, we had Yulia and another one of our roster players, Alessia Jakubowicz, also cracked the top 10 in doubles. So Alessia's always done these types of things. She, she's been a quiet leader for our group and somebody that everybody kind of looks up to, just the way she goes about and handles herself, and it's neat because she's quite quiet, but she's also kind of the social leader of our group. So she has a well-rounded approach to, being a leader. She has tough conversations with players sometimes. It takes a lot of pressure off of coaches, as coaches that have done this a long time. When you have leadership amongst your players, boy, that goes a long way. We were fortunate with that in the past several years. We've had great leaders in our program. But when Yulia comes out and you see, she played number one against Georgia Tech. Let's say, that's where everybody kind of looks to on the scoreboard first. They didn't have a scoreboard there, by the way. But when you look at this scoreboard, you see the number one score first, and she lost her first set, I believe 6-0. But then that resilience that she shows, to get that second set, there's no doubt in my mind that Tanya can look beside her, Tatiana Sasnouskaya. Tanya can look beside her and draw a little bit of inspiration, the same way that Yulia can look to her for inspiration. And it spreads down the lineup. And, I think that type of experience that Yulia has also, we talk about leaders in the program, it also provides a fair amount of composure for the coaches, this weekend, Brooke just got hired at William & Mary, so we're short-staffed on court at this level we're at. You just need as much help as you can get when you're playing these good teams. Especially teams coached by Rodney Harmons and Mark Byers and Alex Casati it's like just great staffs. And so when you have leaders like that, you have great composure, your coaches as well. And I thought that we remained very calm throughout the entire event, to be honest. But then throughout the entire Georgia Tech, let's say, kind of comeback that we staged, that we kind of were calm and just kind of slow and patiently let it happen. And I think that starts with our players and the way they compose themselves.
I'm a nickname guy, so I would do this. You just call her Star. I just be like, hey, Star, how you doing today? Like, you're our Star.
Well, if you look at her nickname even further than that, it's even more peculiar because it says Star ODU.
Yeah.
We've worked together for Yulia and I for 5 years now. So she's called me every nickname under the sun, that's for sure. But no, I've usually just stuck to Yulia with her.
Yeah, I'm sure there are some profane ones in there too. I won't announce now, but
she's a very cordial person. They're probably under her breath.
I like it. My last question for you here, as you look at this team, you talk about having the group that can do some special things, and they've accomplished some special things over the past few seasons. You now have the trip to Madison on your schedule. Obviously, all that conference play still to go. What are you hoping to see from your group this season?
Well, you want to compete for a conference title every year. Those goals don't change. Every year that we want our process to be a little bit better. So we are really focused on a more precise strength conditioning regimen this year, especially with how much we're on the road. That's going to be important. We're really focused on a little bit more on quality nutrition and quality sleep. We've been doing some more sleep studies and type of stuff like that, because recovery is going to be so important for us, especially in this first leg. Going into national indoors, wow, what an honor it is to compete in that, first of all, and really just the team senses that, and they also sense that, hey, we're going up there to play the top 15 teams in the country, not who everybody thought were the top 15 last week. Right now you're going up there and go see the top 15, and so it's just a pleasure to be part of the conversation, and we want to go up there and fight as hard as we can. Being a good player, I love this great stat. I think it was Dominic Carbarti. He says, "Hey, I'm 30 in the world for my entire life, but I lose every single week."
Yeah.
It's like, wow, that's something. So that's something, a growing process for us as well. So we're going to play this tough schedule. Can't go out there and think you're going to go 20-0 every year. You have to be resilient. I think they made that comment too. College coaches jumping to the NFL, they're just not used to taking losses and dealing with them and building on them. So that's where we as a program, we're focusing on those things, taking micro successes if we need to find those, and building on everything we can.
Yeah, well, again, no losses for you yet this season. Clearly, it's working out so far. This is the final one I'll sneak in. 2-4-3 results. Is that like, do you book a physical the next day and say, like, I think I'm having heart palpitations, doctor? Like, I really need some help right away.
I did not miss taking my blood pressure medicine on either one of those days, so that's good.
Good. I'm glad to hear. Well, Coach, again.
And I keep drinking the water. And
so, yeah, the electrolytes, right? You got to mix them in. It's just for you as well. Well, again, Coach, congratulations on a fantastic weekend. Look forward to seeing you all in Madison, and look forward to what should be an outstanding 2022 season.
Thank you so much for having me.
To Old Dominion women's tennis head coach Dom Manilla for taking the time to join us. Again, you can hear our full conversation over on the Cracked Interviews podcast feed. I got to give a shout out to super producer Daniel Westoff for being able to incorporate those interviews not only into our podcast feed, but also into our live show. He really is the best in the business, Jay. But with all of that said, we've now touched on all 15 regions. We hope you guys are well aware now of what happened over the past kickoff event. Now we preview the week ahead, Jay, because yes, the national indoors, not this weekend, but the following weekend for the women, 2 weekends for the men, or 3 weekends, however you want to say it. Point being, we've got some time before that, but the college tennis world never sleeps, and there are fantastic matches across the board. You can find all of them over on our friend Chris Halioris' website, College Tennis Ranks. Just click his week ahead tab. We filtered it down to some of the best here we see over the course of the next 5 days. Jay, with that in mind, give me your top 3. What are you going to be watching most closely?
Well, there's certainly no rest for the weary, right? Off the heels of the kickoff weekend, which actually is very easy to follow, thankfully, to Cracked Racquets and Slam Tennis, and just have it all in one place. And now we all kind of disperse. But I think the first one I'm watching for here is Baylor versus Texas. We saw Baylor at the kickoff weekend. This is Texas's first real test of the year. So I'm interested to see how, Collins and Shavatapan at 2 and 3 step up there, as well as kind of the test for Texas at the bottom of the lineup in terms of those freshmen that we talked about, and kind of who plays 4, 5, and 6 and how well they compete against Baylor, who feels pretty solid throughout 1 through 6.
Yeah, first of all, shout out to super producer Daniel Westoff, who messages us throughout this show and goes, sorry, I didn't put the graphic in chronological order. I promise you were the only one who noticed that, super producer Daniel Westoff. That's why you're the best in the business. But he wants me to apologize on his behalf. I agree, especially because what if Rapalou being down that low, what if it's like, okay, but we're going to pull the freshman and play her here against Baylor because we like her experienced hand in this instance. And at the same time, this is a Baylor team that did not qualify for the national indoors, that was expecting Washington this weekend. Unfortunately, now not going to get Washington as they're preparing for the national indoors, but it's a hungry team, right? Like this is a Baylor team that last year, when it lost, it was usually to Texas. Like, what was it? 4 losses on the year, or 5, and all but 1 was to Texas, the other to Duke. Like, Texas is the enemy, and it's enemy number 1 for the Baylor Bears. I think it does have to make the list. I would agree with you. With that in mind, give me number 2.
So the next 2 is cheating because I'm taking 2 matches here. It's
it would be a Cracked Racquets podcast
without a little cheating. Yeah. So I'm taking the Old Dominion swing here through Florida. We talked about the scheduling of Old Dominion. This is what I was referring to. They take on the Gators on Thursday and then Miami on Saturday. This is a really interesting road swing to me. First of all, both Florida, Miami, top 25 teams. We saw Miami's success, how good they were against USC, Florida obviously qualifying, Old Dominion on the road. And, they get to test and see how good, continue that momentum from the kickoff weekend.
Yeah, I talked to Coach Manilla about that swing. He's like, why did I schedule it like that? Because I have the team to do it. And, again, after the weekend they have, I don't want to say 0-2 is unacceptable, but it's a little bit of a balloon pop. Like, they want to go get a win. I think 1-1, you feel good about yourself coming out of that outdoor swing. And it's funny because you go outdoor in Florida to indoor in Madison, Wisconsin. Trust me, that's a swing. Especially if Madison, Wisconsin in February is going to be like it was last time we were all up there when, in Nielsen Tennis Center it was 47 degrees. I loved it. But, oh, man, was it something. Anyways, I agree. I think it has to be number 2. How real is this ODU push? If they go 1-1, it's real. They're a top 20 team. And, again, a win over Miami, which will get tons of ACC matches, or a win over Florida, you will be in the top 16 mix. And so I agree. Cool that you have them number 2. I believe you're cheating again for number 1, right?
It wouldn't be a Cracked Racquets show.
Ain't cheating, ain't trying.
Exactly. So this is what I'm calling the Blue Blood special. We've got North Carolina at Michigan, and then we've got UCLA at Pepperdine. And 2 interesting matches, different narratives here. Obviously for UCLA, tough test against a very good Pepperdine team coming off the heels of 2 really disappointing losses for them. So curious to see how they bounce back. And also, Pepperdine lost to Cal. They kind of steamrolled through kickoff weekend. Like, what do they look like against UCLA? I think we'll learn a lot about both these teams here.
Yeah, and Forbes bounce back. She's going to need to deliver. Alicia Bolton is too good to lose ever at number 2 singles. And so I want to see her bounce back as well. And then all of these new faces. But you're right. For this Pepperdine team, if you're the team we talked about in our college contenders episode, you will win this match over this UCLA team comfortably. You will see that that's a wounded group, and you're going to smell blood in the water, and you're going to capitalize on that. And so I agree. I think that match has to be on the list. I'm going to steal number 1 from you. Come on. It's not a Cracked Racquets podcast if we don't spend 20 seconds on something Michigan related. And of course, Wolverines playing host to the Tar Heels. Is there any world where Michigan wins this match, Jay?
Your imagination.
Fair. That's why I wore the Michigan sweater with Coach Manilla, right? Always got to rep the Wolverine. No, I mean, it's still interesting. What does Carolina do with the lineup? Are they pulling faces as well? If they pull anyone, I will feel disrespected. But it's, I mean, I feel like Carolina's still Carolina, right? So you go on the road, if you're North Carolina, you're always going to get everyone's best shot. And like, this Wolverines team is young. They're hungry. It's a good litmus test to see just how good they are after clearly progressing throughout last weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're going to be disappointed that they didn't make national indoors, right? And they're going to want a shot here at UNC because they're going to not have a shot at indoors at some of the top teams. So they'll absolutely give North Carolina their best shot. This is North Carolina's first, I would say, some serious test of the season. That Georgia match with North Carolina was canceled, so we didn't get to see that. We saw them steamroll through their kickoff weekend. So it will be a good test for both teams. It'll be good prep for UNC for indoors, and it'll be a good litmus test for Michigan to say how good they need to be by the end of the year.
Cut the clip, Westoff. He called Michigan a real test for Carolina. Cut the clip. I want everyone to hear that moving forward. No, those are your most interesting matches of the weekend. Of course, there are plenty of them across the board. To find all the scores, collegetennisranks.com. Week ahead, of course, you can follow things with the ITA as well. With all of that said, we want to get to our Cracked Racquets top 10 rankings before we conclude today's show, but we have to give another shout out to our friends at SwingVision, who are revolutionizing the way all of us can analyze our own tennis games. It's one app on your phone. You set your camera up, you play for an hour. SwingVision has you covered. They're going to analyze your game from every angle, from ball trajectory to forehands made, forehands missed, approach shots, volleys. They're going to categorize for it all as well. Make it really, really simple to document what you're doing when you are on court. And of course, our friends at SwingVision actually spoke with our friends at Tennis Channel on Tennis Channel Live Show. They asked that we share some of that conversation, just let you listeners know, again, what is happening with the SwingVision app. So Westoff, let's roll that clip now and show our listeners what our friends at SwingVision are all about.
Andy also here to talk about SwingVision, the official shot tracking app of Tennis Australia. You're an investor. Andy has his tentacles in everything. Tell us about SwingVision, Andy.
Listen, it's pretty cool, Steve. When I first met with our founder, Swapnil, he said he was going to do all these things. I said, listen, I don't know if you will, but it's worth a punt, right? It's about the Grand Slam experience, basically to your phone. You can have Hawkeye-style line challenges from your wrist. It automatically creates TV quality highlights of a match, gamified training. You can set target zones. This will massively improve junior and college tennis, not only from a line calling perspective, from a training perspective, from an instant data readout perspective. Apple demoed it when they announced the iPhone 13. So it's making some really cool headways. And I feel like there's been a lane to innovate tennis, not just on the pro level, but at the club level for a long time. And Swing is doing that.
SwingVision is the official shot tracking app of Tennis Australia. It's the app that gives you video analysis and line challenges from your smartphone. Pretty incredible stuff. And I am so happy to be joined by Swapnil Sahai, the CEO of SwingVision. Swapnil, great to have you here on TC Live. Your resume is actually online. I've checked it out. I mean, the school, Columbia, Cal Berkeley. Before SwingVision, you're at Tesla. Very smart guy. How did you come up with SwingVision?
I mean, it's crazy. So, I mean, I'm a lifelong tennis player. And then, you know, as you said, I was at Tesla. So I was working in autonomous driving there, basically working on tracking all the cars and pedestrians around the Teslas using artificial intelligence. And it was pretty funny. We actually had these weekly meetings with Elon Musk, the CEO. You might have heard of him. And so there was this meeting where basically I was like, hey, like, can we add radar sensors to the cars? That would really make my life a lot easier. And as you know, radar is used to track the ball speed in the professional tennis matches. And so Elon was basically like, well, do humans have radar? I was like, no. And he's like, they drive, right? I was like, yeah, that's a good point. And so that basically kind of made me realize, like, you know, just keep it simple. And we should be able to use an iPhone to be able to, you know, call the lines. Why not? You know, if I can watch a video of your match in slow motion and tell what's happening, I should be able to automate it. And that's what we do.
So basically with this app, you, with just one phone, you put it on the court and you get line calling for the entire court.
Yeah, it's crazy. So you basically put it behind the baseline. So the angle looks really similar to what you see in like a broadcast match. But, you know, essentially it's capturing video at a higher frame rate than what humans see. So typically humans see it about 24 to 30 frames per second. You know, the modern iPhones can do much more than that. And so for our artificial intelligence, it's basically like watching your match in slow motion. So line calling is like a piece of cake, essentially.
All right, Swapnil. So you already name-dropped Elon Musk. You also have some pretty cool tennis friends, Andy Roddick and James Blake. They're investors in SwingVision. How did you get in contact with Andy and James?
Yeah, it's pretty funny. So a friend of mine ended up going pro, gave me the intro to James. So I went down, met him, convinced him to join the company. And then we were trying to find one more person. So he invited me out to Texas at an EXO event. So I'm there in the locker room with him. And then Andy Roddick walks in, and then Jim Courier, and then John McEnroe. So I got to meet all of them. It was really, really crazy. And Andy asked all the tough questions. He seemed the most interested. And it was pretty funny. At the end of the night, he actually couldn't find his iPhone. And so James tried to call it, but it was on silent. And so we were kind of panicking. He had to catch a flight. So I was like, hey, if you sign into iCloud on my laptop, I can play a sound on your phone, even though it's on silent. And Andy was like shocked, but he tried it anyway. I played the sound. He found his phone. And then he actually came up to me and he's like, are you on Venmo? I'll Venmo you $50,000 right now. It's so funny. So
He Venmoed you $50,000 for finding his iPhone?
No, I mean, he didn't literally do that, but you know how Andy is. Is his humor, and I'm sure he thought about it a little bit harder than that, but eventually did end up investing, and he's been so great, both of them. I mean, they're just so brilliant and so enthusiastic, and have been very generous with their energy and their time to support SwingVision. So we're super lucky.
That's awesome, Swapnil. So what's next for SwingVision? I mean, obviously you're the official app of Tennis Australia, the LTA in the UK. What's the next step?
Yeah, so I mean, you know, we're really trying to bring this Grand Slam experience to all players, right? So we've done that with data, we've done that with video analysis. Next up is officiating. So as you said, we can do line challenges, but we want to move towards electronic line calling, almost like Hawkeye Live on any court in the world. And then, you know, on the coaching side, we want to be able to actually provide real-time feedback for you, so you can essentially have a coach with you no matter where you go. And then on the broadcasting side, you know, why shouldn't anybody be able to just stream their match on any court and, you know, make money off of sponsorship? So I mean, we're really trying to democratize the professional experience for basically all players. And we're kind of full steam ahead on that path.
Well, it sounds amazing. I can't wait to check it out. If you need an angel investor for your next big project, Swapnil, hit me up. Swapnil Sahai, the CEO of SwingVision. Appreciate taking some time here on TC Live and having us gain some more knowledge about what SwingVision's all about.
For sure. Thanks, Steve. Appreciate it.
SwingVision, the official shot tracking app of Tennis Australia. Much more TC Live after this.
Again, a huge thank you to our friends at SwingVision for their support of our efforts here at Crack Rackets moving forward. We're excited to talk with all members of the SwingVision team. And again, let all of you listeners, viewers know how you can get started with SwingVision as soon as tomorrow. But of course, with all of that said, just one thing left for us to do here on this show, Jay. That's unveil the first edition of our Crack Rackets Top 10 poll of the season. Of course, the voters, it was a split ticket here in our first poll of the season. And I guess I'll let all of you listeners know, voters in this Crack Rackets poll, myself, Jay, we come up with our top 10s. We split the difference. Worth noting, we're all, well, never mind. I was going to say something that might have gotten us in trouble. I'm not going to say that out loud, but yes, again, we are, he and I vote together and we make our list, 10 points for 1 point for 10. This is what we ultimately came up with. Our number 1 team right now in the country, Texas, 2 UNC, 3 Cal, 4 UVA. Now we had a split ticket on our number 5 teams. NC State, Pepperdine ultimately tied in that spot. UGA 7, Oklahoma 8, A&M 9, Ohio State 10. All of you viewers will get to see the ITA new coaches poll tomorrow. Listeners will get to hear this podcast with the new poll available as well. So we'll see how things compare. Jay, I know you're a little bit frustrated with some of our Crack Rackets voters, right? Explain why.
Well, there's just one voter in particular I've been a little frustrated with.
Westoff?
Yeah, Westoff. No, I mean, this is a little behind the curtain because we have our combined view here. But, I had Pepperdine a little bit higher. I think as we make these rankings, right, there's a combination of results and potential. And certainly it skews more towards results as you move further and further in the season. So I had Pepperdine a little higher. I still think, I think that loss to Cal will prove to be a very good loss given the strength of that Cal team. And then the only other one I would probably debate is the inclusion of number 10, whether that should be Ohio State or Duke. Duke is off this list here. Obviously they lost to Oklahoma, but they did get the win over Ohio State at home last weekend. So I think that's one of the other ones up for debate as we include in our top 10.
Yeah, no, look, I had Oklahoma a little bit higher than you, I think. And I think I had them all the way up at, I can say it's my vote in USTA poll. I think I had them at number 6 because I just think a victory over Duke, who has already beaten, both Princeton and Ohio State at home. And I think, that win, probably a more valuable win than the Buckeyes' 2 wins over Tennessee and Oklahoma State. So that's why I would push them a little bit ahead. At the same time, you look at a team like UVA, their win over Stanford is probably the best individual win on the board of those teams that aren't pretty clear-cut top 3. Like, I don't know. You could disagree with the order, but Texas, UNC, and Cal is your top 3 right now. Cal beats Pepperdine, and with all due respect, Texas, UNC may not have the wins yet, but they've earned that pedigree. They've earned that right to sit at the top of the rankings. It's a new roster for Pepperdine. And again, if they win this weekend over UCLA comfortably, and they've got the national indoors ahead of them, I agree with you. They're not going to be outside of the top 5 for much, if at all, of this season. Right now, there's still enough unknown that, tied for 5th. It's low, buy now for sure if this is a stock price. But yeah, I guess I'm rewarding the wins right now more than I suppose anything else. I am the ITA ranking system.
For better or worse.
Yeah.
And I think, I was probably a little higher on Georgia. They're the team right now that is the most, I would say, untested of this top 10 that we just haven't seen enough of. And they have so many new pieces even coming in through January. So, I'm excited to see where they fall when they stack up against other top 10 teams at indoors. But overall, we were pretty in lockstep in terms of the teams that we think are top 10 teams.
I was also so confident in my convictions. I'm like, Texas A&M's in my top 10. And now all of you will understand why. I feel good about, I feel again, them being at 9 right now speaks to the quality of the other teams, because I think Texas A&M is a very good team. I cannot wait for them to play Georgia later on this season. That's a match I absolutely have circled in my calendar. But those are our top 10 teams. And that's our recap of what we are affectionately calling week 2 of the college tennis season. Is it week 3, week 4? We'll figure out the nomenclature later. For now, that is our ITA Kickoff Weekend recap here on the Deciding Point. Of course, we will be back Thursday to recap all of the men's action, talk about our men's top 10. We'll have either a coach or player of the week. May change things up on all of you listeners, but a pretty similar format for that. Just two far uglier faces in Matt Stakoyak and Chris Heliors, going to be joining me on that show. With all of that said, though, I want to give you, before I go to the plugs, Jay, any final thoughts, any lasting memories from what was certainly had to be, I mean, after last year, only 7 regions, to have 15 back, there was some chaos, but I was like, 30 in total. It's just like, we're home. I'm like, this is nice.
Yeah, and shout out to Slam Tennis, who made it so easy to follow. Otherwise, without that, the doubling of the teams, I'm not sure I could have handled it. So overall, it's funny. It's called Kickoff Weekend, and it kicks off the season ceremonially, but now more so, I feel like, because this week coming is like a true full college tennis week. We've got the matches lined up, like everything is ready to go. So we're in it, right? Whether it's week 2, week 10, week 5, who knows? But we are officially underway with a lot of action, and I'm excited to keep it going.
Crazy to think 1 week it's like, okay, now we have enough data for a poll. It's like, but you do feel that way. You're like, all right, at least we've gotten to see all these teams compete twice on a weekend, and now a couple of weekends consecutively. Yeah, the biggest takeaway: parity, name of the game. It is going to be an exciting 2022 college tennis season. Of course, again, we're going to be here each and every week, 9 a.m. We're going to try and tighten these down to an hour.
9 p.m. You're in bed at 9 a.m.
Am I? The night is still young at 9 a.m. But yeah, 9 p.m. Eastern time. Thank you, Jay. Every Tuesday, we'll be talking about all the action happening across the college tennis world. Of course, we'll be doing the same Thursday, 7 p.m. Eastern time. Of course, a lot of podcast conversations with a lot of fantastic coaches that I think I'll hold up well right now on our Cracked Interviews podcast feed. You can go hear the rest of my conversation with head coach Dom Manilla as well there, and all of our content available on our website, crackrackets.com. Of course, like, rate, subscribe, review to this show, our Mini Break podcast, Cracked Interviews podcast YouTube channel, to ensure you don't miss any of the content. Of course, if you need the more immediate updates, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, at Cracked Rackets, at AL Gruskin, at J Tweets Tennis. You can find all of us. Let us know your thoughts. What did we get right? What did we get wrong? We want to hear it. A shout out, as always, to super producer Daniel Westoff. Best in the business, folks. And hopefully all of you watched on YouTube to see the work he puts into these shows day in, day out. He is no one I'd rather work with. And shout out as well to our friends at SwingVision, the lifeline that powers us here, point in, point out, as we decide all of these points throughout the season. Again, I thank you to them. Look forward to expanding our partnership moving forward. With all that said, 90 minutes on the dot, Jay, for our fantastic co-host, John Parsons, our super producer, Daniel Westoff, our friends at SwingVision, and all of us here at both Cracked Rackets and the Tennis Channel Podcast Network. I'm your host, Alex Gruskin. Jay, what do we tell the people?
Hey, great shot.
And we will see you all next week. Thanks, everyone.